Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 329 of the Recovery After Stroke podcast. Today, I'm excited to introduce Dave Brooks, a cerebellar stroke survivor whose unique approach to recovery emphasizes humor, positivity, and problem solving. In this episode, Dave shares his journey from the initial shock of his stroke to the resilience he cultivated while dealing with new physical and cognitive challenges. His story is a powerful reminder of the strength found in embracing humor and staying focused on solutions, even when faced with adversity. Before we dive into Dave's journey, I'd like to thank everyone who supports the podcast. If these episodes have provided insight, hope, or support in your own life or for someone you love, please consider supporting the show at patreon.com/recoveryafterstroke. Your support keeps the podcast going, enabling me to bring you these invaluable stories of recovery and resilience. Thank you to all the listeners and everyone considering becoming a supporter. Dave Brooks, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Bill. Great to be here at last. It's been fantastic.
It is good to have you here, Dave. Tell me a little bit about what happened to you.
About 7 years ago, now, before I start, I have to say this is a bit cathartic for me because I'm one of those people that looks forward. I don't look back. I don't reflect, you know, fix and move on. So it's a bit, about an hour ago, I was thinking, you know what? I haven't really talked to anybody about this in any sort of detail, what's happened. So it's a bit weird for me. So if I go a bit strange, then you'll know why.
Okay.
I'm not emotional about these things, but so about 7 years ago, I'd gone to work and I was working in Cambridge in the UK, and I'd just come back off holiday, and you know how all these things are, that there's a bizarre situation, and I'm sure you've heard it many times before. I've never been ill, I've never been into hospital, apart from things I've broken or, whatever. And I just gone into work and I just gone to the toilet. I was sitting on the toilet, so, this is the reality of it. I was thinking, you know what? That fan up there sounds really loud. And it was getting loud. Thinking, what the hell's going on? And then I was just sort of like, there was this invisible force trying to push me into the wall. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. The bizarreness of being caught on the toilet and I was thinking, I've got to get out of here and back to my desk. And there's like an absolute drive. And I managed to walk back out the office, and it's like a really weird force, like somebody was pushing me, trying to push me against the wall. I got to my back to my desk, and a guy I've known for a long time, he's working next to me. Dave, are you all right? I said, No, I feel pretty odd. And this guy, his dad had had a TIA about a year. He said, I think there's something going on. I said, no, I don't think so, because he talked to me about the symptoms, and I said, I don't think that's it.
Hmm.
And then it was just this incredible vertigo, and I couldn't get low enough to the ground. Very weird feeling. I was sitting at my desk, and that was too high. So, and then I started feeling very, very nauseous. So I thought, I've got to go outside, sit outside, and just as soon as I got outside, just couldn't stop throwing up, just because of the it's not a dizziness. It's a very strange thing, and they didn't really know what to do. And where I was working in Cambridge was about probably 10 minutes from Annabrook's Hospital, which is it's a university hospital, so it's well respected. And I said, look, just call Barbara, my wife, get her to come and pick me up and take me home, because I thought there's something a bit odd going on, and really loud whistling in my ear. And so Barbara came in and she said, just call an ambulance. Why didn't you call an ambulance? I said, no, I just want to go home. I just want to go home.
Logic, the logic of women. Oh my God,
Yeah,
just call an ambulance.
if I go home, I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And the ambulance was there probably within 5 minutes. Things are different now. And so that I was 61 then, and I'd never been into hospital or anything like that. Like I should imagine, I have watched a few of the videos on your site, and I hear a similar sort of story.
Mm,
So they got me into hospital. Again, I just couldn't stop throwing up. So they gave me an antiemetic injection, that's all, sorted that out. But then I was on the hospital, the bed sort of stretcher thing up on wheels. I said, I can't stay here. I've got to get on the floor because everything felt like I was like really high up.
hmm
And so the doctor that was there said, yeah, that's fine. You do whatever you want to feel better till we find out what's going on. They just assumed that it was like some inner ear infection. And I've subsequently found out that's a very common misdiagnosis, which makes a cerebellar stroke incredibly dangerous.
hmm
It's only afterwards you realize that because it's not the normal symptoms you get for a stroke. Um, Plus, you know what's going on. With a
hmm
stroke, most people, it's a blank. It's gone. Even TIAs, it's a gone. But with a cerebellar stroke, because of the way it, for some reason, you're fully aware of what's going on.
Yeah, the
So
part of the brain that's impacted is not influencing your awareness. It's not influencing your vision, your speech, the way that your face
correct.
looks. It doesn't do any of that because my stroke, the hemorrhage was near the cerebellum, and the second bleed that I had were exactly those symptoms. The first bleed I had was the same symptoms, but on a lower scale. I go into hospital, they look at me and they think this guy's perfectly well. They have a scan. A scan shows something completely different, and I'm observing myself and thinking, oh, I'm perfectly fine. Also, I'm walking around the ward. I'm talking to people. I'm meeting people at the cafe. The doctors are going, "Where are you? What are you doing?" And it's all simply because of the location. And I was as coherent as I am now. The second time I wasn't because the bleed was a lot larger. It affected
Yeah,
more of the areas of the brain. But vertigo, nausea, vomiting was all were all my symptoms, and I describe it as my stroke not being fast.
exactly. Exactly. And these are only things that you realize afterwards. I'm not one for sort of like digging into too much research and all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I did a little bit of, searching around, probably a month or so afterwards. And so they didn't know what to do with me really. Um, so I had to lie on the floor. And I think one of the senior nurses came in. She said, you can't lie on the floor. We can't have, if any press come in and see you lying on the floor, this is going to be, those photographs will go viral. They'll be all in the newspapers. Eventually, they put me just into a regular ward, and guy came round to see me. Uh, the time sort of moves about, although remember exactly what happened. You know, it's sort of like stretch, stretches and compresses.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's probably over a period of probably an hour or so, because they didn't know what to do with me. I guess it sounds like it's similar with you. Until something concrete happens, it's like you got a problem with a computer or something. If it's intermittent, it's difficult to fix until it goes completely wrong.
Mm.
If it's so they I was sitting in a ward and a guy came round, and he brought a bunch of student doctors around as well, and they said this is David Brooks. He's 61. I was thinking, who are they talking about? Who's this old bloke they're talking about? Because, we all have a different perception of how old we are. We don't think, I'm not a 61-year-old bloke. I'm just. But so it's, and I was just thinking, I want to be home. This was like the middle of the afternoon. I thought they'll sort something out and I'll go home. That'll be fine. I just wanted to go home because that's normality. And then they said, no, we're going to keep you in overnight. And I was thinking, oh, well, I don't really fancy that. This smacks of being properly ill. And there's loads of other ill people around you. And I think, oh, no.
We'll take a quick break here and be right back with more of Dave's story in a moment. While you're here, I'd like to mention my book, The Unexpected Way That a Stroke Became the Best Thing That Happened. It's more than just a personal story, it's a guide for post traumatic growth after stroke, filled with stories from other stroke survivors like Dave who found ways to rebuild and thrive after their trauma. You can find it on Amazon or at recoveryafterstroke.com/book.
So Barbara, sort of like she stayed with me for a while, and then she went back, and they again just assumed it was some sort of weird inner ear infection. They kept giving me injections to stop me throwing up. Couldn't walk. Walking was. Um, I had a couple of interviews with some senior consultants, and they liked my description of how it was. So it was like trying to walk in a very long rowing boat in a rough sea. So you're trying, it's not like you're drunk and you're just going all over. It's sort of like you're walking forwards and it's going like, whoa, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And the next day, the guy came around and he said, yeah, we think you've had a stroke, but it's not a normal stroke. He said, to be honest, one of my students suggested it. And I thought, that's a good move. I applaud that. One of the students said, do you think it might be a cerebellar stroke? And so he looked into it and said, yes. Straight after they've got a dedicated stroke unit at Addenbrooke's Hospital. Took me in there and, they knew what was happening. So, they gave me a load of blood thinners and some basically, I can't remember what it is. It's like a really strong aspirin.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not much more they can do. And they had no idea what had caused it. I'm not a drinker, don't really drink. Maybe I'll have like a beer once a month at the most.
Mm.
I've never smoked. I'm not particularly overweight. I eat reasonably well. And so, they've gone through all these questions and various things. So uh, then that evening, my wife came in to visit, and then I was on the bed, and I just suddenly was just like just seeing it's like fairy lights absolutely
Mm.
everywhere,
Mm.
and I was obviously doing something which was freaked her out a bit. She's tried to find somebody, and this guy said, "Oh, I'm not. I don't specialize in this." But look, you're a doctor. What they didn't say, which I think was not wrong, but that they didn't say that there's not much we can do. We've given all the medication, which is blood thinners and these sort of like super aspirins, um, to sort of just make the blood thin so that you're not going to get a problem. And they didn't know whether it was a bleed or anything, but they knew it was a cerebellar stroke. Um, so the next day I was fine, but walking just horrendous. And then I had the head of the stroke unit came in and he gave me a chat. And then they started doing all the weird tests, cognitive tests, which you don't realize at first you're being tested. They're asking you things like, so where do you live? Okay, okay. And so what day of the week is it? And then they start doing because the cerebellum, as you will very well know, is about fine motor control.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can't reach in and touch your nose or something, and it was all my
Mm-hmm.
left side was just like all over the place. And I ended up being in hospital for 2 weeks. But what is really weird, having never been in hospital, first night I was thinking, I'll be going home tomorrow. so you're going to say, oh no, you're not, you're not going home tomorrow. So it's another day. I think, oh no. By the third day, you're thinking they're looking apple pie and custard today, and you think I've been institutionalized in 3 days flat, and I don't feel I'm that sort of person. It's very very weird, and I think I went through CT scans. They didn't do an MRI scan. Um, they did the CT scan with a really weird injection where you feel like you've wet yourself, which
Mhm.
I'm not quite sure. They inject something automatically that's connected up to it. And that in itself becomes sort of like something that you talk about. You're in a queue, waiting for something, and somebody says, "Oh yeah, I've come in for I've had some stents that have gone wrong." And it was only a young girl, and I was sort of saying she was going in for another scan, and I said, "Have you had a weird injection yet?" Yeah, I've had the weird injection. It's really weird.
The contrast
Um,
going into the veins.
yeah, and it probably took about, I think, something like 3 or 4 days before they said, right, we don't know there isn't a bleed. So, with the scans that they've done and the cerebellum, it's difficult to discover things with the CT scan because there's loads of bones around here that just block how you look in. They eventually did an ultrasound all up my neck. And the guy who was doing it, he said, I could see there was something a bit odd. I said, just tell me. He said, well, there's I think there's 2 or 3 sort of like big arteries run up the back here. He said, have you had a head injury? I said, no. He said, well, one of them's like completely crushed, and the other one's like badly damaged. And I was like, what the hell? And it was only when got back to the ward that I realised I used to race supercarts, which I
Uh,
did for about, okay, if you, it's a big thing in Australia,
Huge,
like
huge. It's
bike.
a massive sport.
It's fast, and I had an accident at about 100 odd miles an hour, and I flipped forwards, smacked my head, landed on my wheels, I broke my shoulder, did my thumb, but adrenaline I'm thinking, right, I'm going out to get this fixed. And I mentioned this to the main consultant. He said, that'll be it. It's just the way he explained it it's very simplistic terms that when I was younger, so that was probably 15 years prior to that, um, no, 12 years maybe. But when you damage something like that, when you're younger, you're a little bit fitter. Um, that doesn't really affect anything. But as you get older, things slow down, your body's gradually wearing out. That damage like that can suddenly have an effect. And the weird thing, there was no stress or anything at work. I was just sitting on the toilet and all went mad.
Maybe it was a
So,
big toilet session, mate.
well, I know it sounds a bit crass, but it's sort of, I find it quite funny.
It is.
And
I think
the
so.
reason that I sort of got in touch with you was because oddly, I was talking to a friend of mine who also had a stroke, but he had a proper bleed, a really bad stroke. So I'm also a drummer. I've been playing drums for donkey's years, and he's a friend who's a guitarist that I've played with before, and he had a properly bad stroke to the point where he's now still, if he touches guitar strings with his fingers, he says it's like razor blades. It's
Mm.
horrible. So I was chatting. I just told him the toilet story, and he said, so he'd obviously looked at your channel at some point. And he said, "You need to talk to Bill." He said, "Yeah, they find it hilarious."
That's right up my alley, mate. That's awesome. And embarrassing and potentially, it could have been a lot worse. It could have been more disgusting than what it ended up being. So it all worked out well.
It's it's amazing how your body, given that it's like something serious is happening, and the fear of embarrassment of being somebody having to. I was thinking somebody's going to have to break in here. They're going to pull me off the toilet, and my pants and trousers are down. That is not happening. So clearly, there's some adrenaline that's and the drive. But I found it's having done a lot of research on afterwards. I've realised that cerebellar stroke it's a relatively there's a small percentage of cerebellar strokes, and back then they were less well understood, and they're still not that well understood. I've watched a couple of channels of an American woman, I can't remember her name. She's done some very good descriptions of a cerebellar stroke and how, it is about the fine, you know, part of your brain is bringing your arm in like this, and the reason for the cerebellum is that it's actually doing that fine little bit of motor control
Mm.
for when you're doing various things.
Coordination, etc. I remember when you're telling me about your embarrassment toilet episode, and you don't want to be in there when everyone's coming to rescue you. I'm one day out of brain surgery, and my left side doesn't work. I can't walk at all, and I can't use my left arm. And I'm in the ward, and I need to go to the toilet. And that's really important, of course, after surgery that people go to the toilet. So the nurses, the doctors, everyone encourages it. They're always asking you, going to the toilet. And I wasn't going. I wasn't going because sometimes, motility slows down after a surgery. And they were giving me laxatives. And they were giving me laxatives day one, and then there was nothing happening. And then they were giving me laxatives day two, and then there was nothing happening. And then the laxatives started to kick in. I had the urge. So I pressed the buzzer to get the nurse there, and she was nowhere to be seen. My nurse was busy, right? She would have had a heaps on her plate, and there was no one turning
Yeah.
up. And I'm thinking, oh, I've got to go to the toilet. I can't. This can't happen here in the bed. I've got to go to the toilet. I haven't been for how many days. Could be ugly. Um,
Yeah.
and there's a wheelchair next to me because the family's been in. They've taken me for a drive on the wheelchair, and we've gone down to the cafe or whatever over the last few days. And I find myself thinking, I've got to do this. I've got to get in the wheelchair somehow. And it was what you described. Like I found some kind of superhuman strength, right, to use half my body to get into the wheelchair. I've got into the wheelchair, and I've just wheeled myself into the sliding door. So the sliding door I pushed it open,
Hmm.
just wheeled myself past the sliding door. And as I did, the nurse walked in and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm sorry, you didn't turn up. I had to go to the toilet. It's happening, and I've got to go now." And she's going, "All right, let me help you up." And she helps me up. And then she hasn't left the room. I said to her,
Oh, yeah.
"What are you doing?" And she said, "Oh, I've got to stay with you in case you fall down." I said, "No, you can't stay with me. You don't understand. Like, I can't have you in here while I'm going to do what I'm going to do. You have to leave." She goes, "I cannot leave. I'm not allowed to leave." I said, "You must leave." I had a conversation with her, almost an argument, for about it seemed like forever, but it was about 30 to 40 seconds. "You must leave." "No, I can't leave. You must leave." And I said to her, "All right, I promise I will not move. I will not do anything other than what I have to do. If just close the door and stand on the other side of the door, please." And she did.
I,
And she did. And
I,
then it was
I,
on for young and old.
yeah, I think it's I found that strange. I think it's something that probably happens to everybody when you haven't been in hospital before. And normally, stuff that you do in private, and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. But I think if you've been in hospital for a while, I think some of those inhibitions will go
Mm-hmm.
because it's something that happens more often. But I found the difficult one was um, just walking to the toilet. That was a mission.
Yeah.
And they said if you're going to the toilet, you had to call somebody. Now sometimes people weren't there, and they said you can't go by yourself. And I was thinking, oh, I bloody am. And it must have looked so strange. And they when I started to get a bit better, probably after the first week, I was sort of okay to get about. And basically, one of the doctors, I can't remember who, they said if you can walk out of here, go down the corridor, go down the stairs, along the corridor downstairs, and come back to your bed. You can go home. I was thinking, shouldn't have told me that because that was an absolute challenge, and I was getting it was difficult. It took let's say about another week, but I found the difficulty with the whole toilet thing is I was that first week I was sleeping a lot. I think
Mm,
all this stuff just drains you,
mm.
not physically, but that drain that you get when you've done an exam or something. You come out and your brain is just sort of like fried.
Yeah.
Um, and then when I was coming out of that, um, and how do I relieve this boredom? So bored. You can't watch daytime TV. You watch it the first day and think, oh, I can't do that. I'm looking outside and all these people walking around outside and, down in the sort of like, I think, I just want to be out there taking my dog for a walk. That's what I want. And then you're thinking, oh, I'll go to the toilet and clean my teeth, just relieve the boredom. Or I'll just go to the toilet or something like that. And then, like at the end of the day, this nurse came and said, "We've noticed you're going to the toilet quite a lot. We just want to check." I was thinking, it was nothing to do with you. They said, "We need to know why you're going to the toilet because," as I said, "Look, I am so bored. I will do anything to relieve the boredom. If that means going to the bathroom 4 times a day to clean my teeth because I can't go very far, that's what I'm going to do." And they put also they said, if you need to go to the toilet in at night when the lights are out, you need to call somebody. I thought that was my training time because there's only the night staff on, so I could actually sort of move about. They give me some physio things to do, and then that was my goal to sort of like just. I didn't go down the stairs at night, but I was walking up and down the corridor and making my way back. But the
Yeah.
hospital is a very strange place when you've not been there before. There was a guy who was at the end. Um, he was quiet during the day, never said anything. I think he may have come in off the street because um, they tidied him all up, and he was just quiet during the day. And then the lights would go out at 9 or 10 o'clock, and he just starts shouting. And I think, oh no, I don't want to be here. I
Yeah.
don't want to be here. And the guy who was between me and this other, like, he said, he tried to get into bed with me last night. He said, when are you going out? Because I want your bed. And there's I think humor is a massive thing. You know, you've got to see, I think there's two things. One is don't fight stuff. This is what I
Mm,
was talking to a friend about the other day. Um, you know, there may be a load of stuff you can't do. I was thinking, will I be able to play the drums again?
mm.
And I was thinking, well, okay, I can't really do anything in my left hand, but I've always played. You can play drums just one-handed.
And there's
It's
that
not
drummer from Def Leppard that did it.
exactly. So there is a way around. I was thinking that'll be okay. I can do that and do that. And it's sort of, I think that and seeing the humor in situations stops you going nuts.
Yeah.
I think it was one of the things I mentioned to you in the early thing. I think pulling your way through something. I've never been properly ill before. You
Mm,
know, in the grand scale of things, probably that wasn't what I went through. Could have been quite bad, but it wasn't. It's not like I have a massive heart attack or something. But it's it's up here. And in fact, that's one of the physios. Because after I came out, the hospital were very good. They organised physios. I had a whole lot of cognitive tests that I had to do. I couldn't drive for 2 months. Um, and also they brought somebody round. There's two women came round. One was to talk to my wife separately in the kitchen, which I think was it's almost like a counselling thing. And one came to talk to me privately out in the conservatory. And they were asking all these questions like, do you feel like not carrying on? And so, well, look, to be honest, I'll wait for you to go because I've got a load of stuff to do. I've got I want to get on with something,
you're just not the
because
typical. Repar-
I have to be doing something, making something, or you
yeah.
know. So I think having that attitude of I'm going to find a way around this.
Mm,
What can I do, rather than what can't I do?
mm-hmm.
And all the
So,
funny stories about what's going on, or
mm,
just seeing the funny side of it. And like when I was talking to a friend, he was saying it's he struggled,
mm,
and I don't talk to people about these things. Like I said, I'm a bit of
mm,
I look forwards, not backwards. But I think I tend to deal with things in a way that suits me. I've got problems, or I'll go out for a walk with the dog or something, and I don't internalize it. I think that's a common thing that people level, particularly at men.
mm-hmm.
I do internalize it. But what I'm doing is fathoming out, well, if I do this, I can do that. If I do this, I can do that. And
Mm,
just logically working through stuff, but not thinking about the whole thing. It's like, how do you
yeah.
solve a big problem? How do you
Small
eat an
chunks.
elephant? Small bites.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think there's times when I felt, I was thinking, oh, this, is this going to come back? What's going to happen?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I've got a friend who's a GP, and I said, well, what can I do? He said, well, to be honest, Dave, you're not really in the risk group. Something else has caused this. And, that was just before when I spoke to the consultant. But the really weird thing is these cognitive tests they do, and they do it with all the patients in the stroke ward,
Mm,
which is they're asking them, and you'll get some old bloke opposite me, a really nice old bloke, well, probably not much older than me, but he was saying, I was saying, how are you? Fine. And he'd chat away, and the nurse would come in. She said, oh, how are you today? Fine. And he'd say, what day is it? And he'd just come out with some random thing. I said, do you know where you are? He said, oh. And then she showed him, her little sort of lapel watch
mm-hmm.
on a uniform. He said, "This is a clue. What do you what's this?" He said, "It's the 1927 Congressional Model Medal for." I'm thinking he's ill, but on the face of it, he's just sort of like a fairly normal old bloke. So it was interesting being in the stroke unit
Mm.
because they're testing you. Um, and
And
I know in the
you don't identify as having had a stroke still, even though they've told you what's happened, etc. You're looking around and you're seeing these different versions of it, and you're going, oh, I just need to get out of here. I need to go home.
exactly. I did get a lot of so a lot of the time I'll get they'd ask me, do you mind if a student comes in and talks to you? And I think possibly was because I had a cerebellar stroke and I sort of know what's going on and I can reflect and remember what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
They were asking me questions, which was probably not the response they were getting for some of the other patients in
Yeah,
there.
because they
So
may
that
not be
actually I was
getting a
thinking,
response.
yeah, because they don't remember. And even very early on, one of the consultants said he came in. He said, oh, "I'm going to give you 3 words, and I'm going to come back in an hour, and I expect you to know." So it's lemon key ball, and I will never forget them. You know, and whenever he walked past in the ward, I go lemon key ball. It's sort of like they're not having me like that, but it's a you've probably been. It sounds like you've been through quite a bit more because you've had, sort of multiple things.
Mm,
But I was saying to a friend, it's you've got to have because I've never been ill before. I always occasionally wondered how I would behave if I was seriously ill,
you know,
and I'm happy that I behaved the right way. You know, thinking positive, which is difficult,
yes.
but thinking, well, I can do this. I was saying before, what can I do rather than what can't I do?
What are my
Uh,
problems? It's like what are the solutions rather than what are the problems. It's very the mindset that you have as a default is a really great thing. A lot of stroke survivors struggle with their mindset because they might be experiencing a version of the stroke that's far more serious. They may have far more challenges to overcome, and it's a lot of overwhelm. It's like, where do I start? And they also have a different way of looking at life and experiencing illness and dealing with trauma and all that kind of stuff. And it's a very different experience. But one of the people that are on my podcast who actually come onto the podcast seem to have like that a solutions focused approach, and they're cognitively trying to get their head around it. They are wrestling with thoughts, ideas. They're putting it out there. They're speaking. They're sharing with other people. They have a lot of things in common. The people that come on the podcast, the people that sit back and listen to the podcast, who are curious. Maybe I'll be on the podcast one day, or maybe when I'm ready, I'll reach out. They're signs that you're starting to accept this thing and deal with it, and find ways around it, adapt, um, look at ways to still have an awesome life, even though you're dealing
Mm.
with a lot of drama and problems. Um, so I see a lot of patterns in the way that people get to where you're at. Some take longer, but you just seem to get there quicker. Is that a reflection of your personality just before stroke anyway? Is that how you tackled life's challenges? Because I imagine as a bloke who's got a partner, stuff's gone wrong with partners, with it may have been family members, work situations. You still, even though you're mild mannered, right, and you're just coming across as cool, calm, and collected, you're still been in life. You've had life happen to you. So
Hmm.
is how you responded extension of how you responded to other serious situations in life?
Yes. Well, yes. So, Barbara, my wife, was, excellent, and I didn't realise a lot of stuff that was going on in the background. She was freaked, and I'm sure you hear that, a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
time. She was also hyper vigilant, which was driving me nuts. I said, I want to go out and walk the dog. No, 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 I'll come in with you. No, no, I'll be fine. Just gonna go over the road. No, 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 I'll be. So I am not particularly emotional. I mean, I joke that, my emotions were surgically removed at birth. It's not quite true, but I don't let things get to me too much. You
Mm.
know, you know, I will blow. There's an inner monkey that sometimes you can't keep it down.
Yeah.
But most things I just let go by. So so I think what you were saying is that type of behavior probably leads to not being freaked out. You're not really changing. There are times, I'll say, there were times when you're thinking, you know, will I be able to drive again? I can't manage if I can't drive. I've been driving since I was 16 on, mopeds and motorbikes. So,
Mhm.
that would be horrendous. But those things, I wasn't, until I got much later on, I was thinking, okay, I'm not allowed, because they just don't let you drive for 2 months.
Mhm.
So I was thinking, oh, that'll be all right. That'll be okay. Mm. And then you start to worry about it. But then you think, well, what could I do instead? So it's finding alternatives all the time. It's actually problem
Mhm.
solving,
Mhm.
which is, I'm a software developer mainly, and that's my job. So it's sort of, I guess that's my way of looking at it. Don't let things get to me too much.
How
But
long did it
one of
take you to
the
go say that? Finish what you were saying here. Sorry.
So yeah, I think one of the things I found interesting was when one of the, I can't remember whether it was a physio or whether it was one of the women who came round who was doing some sort of cognitive tests or counselling or something. She said, "You don't seem to be freaked by this at all." I said, "Well, I don't feel freaked. So occasionally sort of think, And she said, "That's what gets most people. There's all the physical stuff. It's true of any sort of more serious illness. It's up here. If you can crack it up here, that's a big part of the problem
Yeah.
solved." Sorry, you were gonna say.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, that not getting freaked. Like if you can stay cool, calm, and collected, if you can just stay calm about the situation, you're also helping the situation. Actually, you're actually making a massive positive, you're creating a massive positive influence on how the situation plays out, even though you're kind of out of control when something's happening in your head. But by being calm, you're not bringing that terror, and you're not bringing that version of sort of like that unsettledness into a situation that's already potentially kind of on the brink of being difficult and unsettled.
Yeah. I
Um,
was thinking about this today. I was thinking it's not about suppressing all these feelings.
no,
It's about thinking, well, I've got all these things. What's the solution to that? What's the solution to
mm,
that? I think it's what it sounds like you're saying you see fairly often is people are rationalizing the situation and happy to talk about it. And I think you were going to ask how long did it take me to get back?
yeah, I was gonna. Before we get to that, it's it's about. I think it's good if you can be aware of all of the challenges, park them for now, deal with the ones that are most pertinent right now,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and then when it comes time to freak out, get emotional, cry, angry, all of that, allow that to happen as well. And it's observe yourself going through that, allow it to happen. Don't suppress it. Ride the wave, whatever that looks like. But it's definitely about picking the right moments for the appropriate response for the situation if you can. And that helps tremendously getting you through hospital, getting you through a bad day, getting you through a difficult news. It all helps. Waking up with a deficit you don't know if you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. There's a right time to deal with all of it, and maybe a right location too. So um, I like that approach that you've got. But does that also mean that people find you kind of difficult to read? Are people always wondering about you, thinking this guy
Yeah.
should be freaking out more because I would be?
Yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, I said to Barbara, don't tell too many people, not because I didn't want them to know,
Mm,
but I can't stand that people coming up and say, "Oh, how are you?"
mm,
Thinking, I don't, I'm just getting on with things. I'm fine.
yeah,
You know, it's sort of, and also a situation people don't quite know what to say to you. I will
mhm,
chat to people about this, but I'm not going to broadcast it,
mm.
unless
Not,
it's
not
sort of,
like me.
because, well, but what you've done is sort of quite interesting. One of the things that I found did affect me was, although a cerebellar stroke doesn't affect your speech necessarily, I was finding that sometimes when I was talking, I would get like almost like my brain wasn't connected to part of my mouth.
Mm,
So it wasn't I was sounding stupid, but I was thinking, oh, that sounds a bit fluffed. And because one of my other things that I do is I've built drones for about 15 years. I fly drones. I've operated them commercially. I still do. I also fly first person view drones, with the goggles
mm,
where you're flying through all that stuff. And somebody thought that might have been the cause of it. You head up like this. I said, no,
mm.
that's just. Um,
Well, there is one of
but
those conditions, lumberjack disease, they call it in America,
okay,
where in that forestry industry, back in the old days when they were chopping trees down with the axe and then looking up to see where the tree falls,
interesting.
that used to damage the carotid arteries of, or the vertebral arteries, whichever ones are at the back. I always forget. And it used to cause dissections in the arteries. And as a result of that, that would cause a clot, and that would cause a stroke. It was very common. Um,
Interesting. So what I did was I did have a little YouTube channel just about with it. So there's sort of two types of drones. There's the camera drone, the drones that are sort of cinematic DJI type drones,
mm,
and then there's the FPV stuff, which is if you take your hands off the sticks, they just fall over. You have to fly them, and it's all done with the goggles. So I had a bit of a, so it's a niche with it. Drone stuff is sort of a niche. but this is like a niche within that niche. And I'd done a few YouTube videos, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to try and do something which forces me, almost like an exercise, almost like physio. So I started doing things to camera, learning how to read from a teleprompter, which is actually really hard.
Uh-huh.
You know, I I used to work for a period. I worked for BBC News, so I worked with a lot of news readers. When they do it, you realise they are very good at what they do.
Experts.
It's because they don't look like they're staring at the camera like this, and it's taken a while. I mean, that's I've carried on doing that because I think it's like an exercise really.
Mm.
But I don't know about you, but a lot of the tests that I was doing that I was given in hospital, like reaching out and trying to touch things, I still do in the shower every morning. I stand there. I've got these tiny little tiles all over
Mm.
the bathroom. Think I'm going to touch that cross between those from here to there, just to make sure that with both hands that it's going where I want it to go.
That's a
And
great
I
thing
think
to that's a great thing to monitor as well.
it's a measure.
Yeah.
It's a quantitative measure of what's going on. Because you can lose things without realizing
Mm.
sometimes. I think you've got to be able to do something. But it took me. I I went after I came out of the hospital. I was doing the physio. I then volunteered to do a subsequent cognitive test at another hospital, which is a little bit closer. Because I was thinking, got to do this, and it was all about things like get you to stand on one leg with your arms out and your eyes shut, and all the things that are actually quite difficult anyway. And, starting at 100, count backwards, taking seven off each time, and all these things. And they give you, at the beginning, they give you a reasonably complicated address. And then after the hour, they say, what was that address we gave you? I was thinking, oh, blimey. And I think people would struggle with that anyway. But a lot of what they're doing is sort of they're testing simple things like, what day of the week it is and all that sort of thing. But I found that I don't want to shy away from that stuff, because it is maybe it's because my background sort of engineering, it's sort of I want to be able to know quantitatively,
You need data.
how well I'm doing. But what I was doing, I was really overcompensating to try and make out I was fine. So when they were asking me to do certain tests, I was doing it so fast, just to show, yeah, it's not a problem. Anything, draw around this and do this, I think. And it was too much. I was just not showing off, but I was overcompensating to make out that actually I was fine, but I wasn't really. Things like I've always run up and down stairs for some reason. Even now, I will run up and down stairs, and it's probably only in the last 2 years that I can confidently run downstairs again without holding on to anything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually taken quite a long time, and I think probably I'm back to about high 90s in
Mm.
terms of being fixed. But there's just little things occasionally. I use practicing drums and drum rudiments to get my left hand going because I think, can I play drums again? Which was actually a really good thing to complement the physio exercises that I've been given. Um, and now I I sort of got bored of playing drums after all those years. Well, it's mainly all the travel, to be honest, and dealing with awkward people. The actual gigs are fine,
Mm.
but I started to think, should I start playing drums again? But I realised that actually I'll be fine to play in a band again, but my left hand doesn't quite have the definition that it used to.
Muscularly.
And it's like very fine control. I just can't do it. And I've practiced and practiced and practiced. So if I go into something, so I do something, it will take a couple of goes. It's almost like it has to rev up.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the consultants told me the thing about the brain is it doesn't fix itself. If you've got a damaged part of your brain anywhere, it doesn't fix itself. But what there's a spare capacity that actually you have to sort of like, you don't know you're doing it, but if you're practicing something, doing something the same thing over and over again,
You
your
rewire.
brain is learning new ways or different sort of paths
Yeah,
or
reroute.
synapses or whatever it is to just sort of relearn how to do that.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
that's the
and they also,
neuroplasticity side of it. It's just literally about applying that particular task to another part of the brain that isn't damaged, that's just picking up the slack.
and also, when they were giving me tasks to walk anywhere, stuff like that, I was going really fast, and they were saying, no, walking fast, that's something where you can do easily because it's not using mainly using your brain. You have to do things slowly
Hmm.
because that's where you're using your brain. You know,
Hmm.
it becomes a sort of like almost like a I don't know how it works, but they were, I was going hell for leather or anything. But any exercises that the physios gave me, I was just doubling it, you know, which may have been good, may have been bad, I don't know. But I feel fine now, and I
Yeah,
sort of I say I've talked to my friend about it. I've come across somebody else who's, um
I reckon you're
my
trying to convince yourself more than you're trying to convince them.
oh yeah, absolutely. It is. It's a like it's a self-drive thing. It's not, but there is an element of saying, look, I'm okay, but
Mm.
it's almost like you're overdoing something,
Mm.
to try and prove a point because you don't want to feel that you're being singled out or ill,
Yeah,
basically.
fair enough.
But it's
So,
some, I think now it's sort of, I'd say it's like 98, 99%
yeah,
fixed.
yeah, yeah. I was going to ask you about like your time from hospital to home and then back to driving and back to work. How did all of that happen? How did it unfold?
So I was in hospital for a couple of weeks. I then so I couldn't drive for 2 months. So I stopped doing any work. I'm a freelance contractor, so I can choose to work when I like. And it was after when I could start driving again. That's when I went back into. I had like a month or left on that contract, so I went back in and did some stuff, and it was fine. Um, I wasn't, I wasn't. I was only operating at probably 70, 75% at best. Outwardly, inwardly, I think it was probably less than that. But
Okay.
you don't admit it to yourself. You're thinking, this will be all right. It's just trying to be positive about it.
Yeah.
And you can't, I don't think you can be truly honest. I mean, the main thing, I mean, Barbara was fantastic. It did freak her out. And I think part of trying to show that you're not as ill as you are, um, particularly so you don't freak your kids out.
Mm.
I mean, our kids are, they're older,
There's
but
so much of
you
that
want to make.
pretending things are better than they are so that everyone else stays calm.
But the good thing about having kids is you can train them to have the same sense of humor as you and hate the
Mm.
same things that you do. So, they've got a fantastic sense of humor. So, that's a common thing.
Mm.
That can disguise a lot of the. You can overdo that sort of thing, but
Mm.
I think it's got a fairly dark sense of humor. So that's fine.
It's very United Kingdom, isn't it? It's very common in
I
that
think
part of the world.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I know, having worked in America for a bit for a company, they couldn't understand
Your
the British
jokes.
sense of humour.
Yeah.
They could not understand sarcasm, and they can't understand flippancy. If
Hmm.
you're flippant about something, they don't understand. Well, not all people, but a lot of people in the workplace don't get. They think that if you're being flippant, you're not serious about what you're doing.
Uh-huh.
You know, and as a group of us were working there on and off for about a year. We're working backwards and forwards in various places, and we used to play on that because we thought it's hilarious.
Hmm. Just
But
freaking people out because you were so laissez-faire about something. Oh yeah.
well, yeah,
Whatever.
or just saying something like stupid and trivial or childish or something
Yeah.
like that, and they look at you like you're completely mad. But anyway, yeah, I think one of the early things I said to you, and when I originally made contact, was that I think having a sense of humor is a good as a good portion of recovering. Um, because even like silly situations like the people that you're in the bed next to a hospital,
Hmm.
there's just some odd stuff going on. I used to regularly when some people came into hospital because I was all wired up because my blood pressure. I don't know about you, my blood pressure was up at like 250 over something
Oh,
at one point,
no.
massively high.
Wow.
So I was all wired up for probably most of the time I was in there. But I used to love when people come in and they just sort of like, you sit there, you got all this stuff out. I just sort of like, if you go to the toilet, you have to take it off. But I just started like grab it, rip it off, and go. Ugh. I had this idea. I had this idea that what I was going to do. My mother-in-law, she had a walking frame at one point, and if people came round to the house after they knew it, was to go to the door and with the walking frame, and they open the door, and then you go, "It's a miracle! I can walk." But I was told that probably wasn't a good idea. But I
I
think
hear you.
it freaks some people out. But
I hear you.
I
I
think
think you got to laugh about it. I know that it's hard for some people to laugh about the version of their particular stroke. You have to find the humor because it is how it breaks those circuits of crappiness that's going on, all the terrible things that are happening. Like you have to be able to find somewhere to laugh and give yourself a bit of relief from all of the stuff that you're dealing with that you're not trained to deal with, that you don't have the skills to deal with. I know there's,
you're never expecting it. That's the
yeah,
thing. It's
I know, and there's people that go through a lot of pain after stroke, physical pain and all that type of thing, and I get it, I get it. I, I just feel like there is no place for um. There's nothing funny about stroke. That comment, I don't think, is helpful to any human being. Like there has to be something funny, even about the worst version of the stroke. Like there just has to be, so that you can get a little bit of relief, get some endorphins into your body, and make yourself feel better, even if it's for 10 seconds or 15 seconds.
I would always argue there's pretty much humor in anything.
Everything. Yeah, I'm with
you
you.
know, uh, sometimes you may not feel like that, but
Yeah.
I think it's just bizarre situations. You think this is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but I think it is about having a sense of humor. It is about being positive, and it's not freaking out. But there's such easy things to say,
Correct.
you know, and I don't know whether that's just saying that is not enough.
No,
I
no,
don't
there's a
think
lot of
I
action.
think I couldn't advise people who've really had a stroke because I'd
No.
say, well, just have a sense of humor, you know, deal with everything in little bits and just be positive. But it's like saying to somebody who's got depression, "Oh,
Mm.
come on, snap out of it."
Yeah, no.
Doesn't work like that.
No, no.
You have to have a different approach.
Yeah.
That's how
And
it
you
works for
went back to
me.
work and you drove again and you've got an income still, and you don't have to worry about the house being taken by the bank, and you haven't got a list of medical bills. Like, yeah, it's a completely different subjective experience that each individual has. Like each stroke is different and affects people differently. It's the
Yeah,
same
in the
thing.
UK, things have got worse, but haven't we don't have to pay for medical treatment. You know, well,
Yeah.
we do, but we pay.
But
It comes out of
not in the
a
way that
monthly
it
thing.
happens in America, which is really dramatic for some people. Yeah.
Yeah, I
We
mean, it's
haven't,
not perfect here.
no,
Sorry, yeah.
we haven't got back to how long it took you to get back to driving and all that other stuff.
So I was driving within 2 months of coming out of hospital, so that would have been two and a half to about 3 months.
Was that a retest?
Um, no, no, didn't have to do it. No, you just had to let them know. That was all I had to do. There's no. I think there are certain medical conditions where you have to have a retest. If I'm honest, if I was having to do a retest, I'd be thinking, yeah,
Oh, because
I want to know.
you were a driver and you want to know where you're at.
Yeah, exactly. I'm quite happy. If they bring in so you have to retest when you're 75 or 80, I'll be thinking, yeah, that's a good idea. But so I was back working again. I wasn't working particularly hard. I was working on a side project as well, which I sort of had to. It was a startup thing. I was developing an app for them, and I didn't really. I sort of got bored with it. So it was actually worked out quite well, but there was some pressure being put on me to carry on. When are you going to be back? When are you going to be back? When are you going to be back? I said, well, I don't know. You know, And eventually, I just backed away from that. I'm still, in fact, I'm still working with some of those same people on some stuff I'm doing at the moment. But I sort of, you know, I I enjoy work. I don't consider work work. Work for me is a paid hobby, and I only do things that I'm interested in. I've only ever done that. I've been lucky enough that it's been reasonably well paid, and if something's not working, I don't think anything. I'm just thinking, no, that's it, quitting. No, I'm not doing that. I'm going to go and do this. Um, but I think, uh, you know, I think it's possibly just my same part of my character that keeps me driving forward.
Yeah, that
Um,
not reflecting backwards. Well, obviously you're aware of the past, the things that you've been through, the family's been through, you've gone through, the other people been through. What you're saying
yes,
is
and
you
all
don't
those sorts of
dwell,
things. Yeah.
you don't dwell
No,
on those
that's
instances,
exactly.
and it sounds like you don't do a lot of why me kind of questioning, which is never helpful. Other than
Like
if
you were
you're
saying
doing
about
why
something.
me, what's the purpose of this stroke? If you're doing that, I think that's helpful. Like, what's the point? Why did it happen to me? How can I transform this maybe? But you're not
Yeah,
dwelling on the
exactly.
negative side of life.
No, I never have. It's always, I'm pretty positive about things.
Mm.
But I think, that's easy to say. It's easy for me to say and do.
Well, yeah,
It's not all the time,
yeah.
but I think that's quite a difficult thing. I'm not stupid enough to think that that can work for everybody.
And
Some people
and I
need a
don't
lot
say
more
that,
help.
yeah. And I don't say that for that reason. What I like doing is kind of just demonstrating the difference in people, and what that might do is that might somebody make somebody curious about why does Dave do life like that? And I wonder if I could do life like that, and what would be the benefits of doing life like that, and how might that version in some particular situations help me. That's kind of like what the podcast is about. It's about to show the differences. 320 episodes so far. Like, it's about showing all the different versions and variations so that people can cherry pick what they want out of a conversation and go, I like what they've said. I'm going to take that one thing out of the whole interview.
So when somebody mentioned your podcast, I thought I'll just go and have a quick look. And I was thinking, oh, that's quite interesting because there was a few things about cerebellar stroke.
Mm,
And there's obviously some people who are a little bit more serious about things,
mm,
you know, and that's fine. I think but it's, I think not dwelling on the past, but learning from the past
mm,
is a good thing.
yeah.
And because if you just think, like you say, why me? Why did I get this thing? You go around. I think you go around in a bloody spiral backwards.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's that's just the way I deal with things.
Yeah.
You know.
I quite like that version. That's similar to me, although I found myself in the trap every so often when things were really bad physically and mentally, and when my cognition wasn't the best. I really found myself in the hole and kind of, oh my gosh, like I don't know, what do I do here? I've never been here before. How do I handle this?
Hmm.
And then it's like, okay, let's find a solution. Let's try and handle it, and let's get out of it if we can, and as quickly as possible. Um, Counseling for me was huge. And for me, counseling was more about that mental gymnastics. It's all about kind of um, getting my ideas and my thoughts tested by somebody else. Like you, oh yeah, I'll go for that drive if they want to test my driving. I'm the
Yeah.
same. I'll go for that counseling session so I can have my thoughts and my ideas tested by somebody else, and then I can get a different perspective and a different approach, and then I can take that with me and do something about it or not. That's kind of what was for me that worked, and this is what every you said this is potentially cathartic for you. This is what every session is for me. This is like a cheap counseling session, and everyone who attends is
I'll
doing
send
me
you the bill.
yeah, is doing me a service they just don't know about.
So the
So
counselling you had, was that something that you was sort of part of some care package, or was it something that you
no,
realised you had to sort out for yourself?
I'm quite intellectual, and I always have been. When I was a little kid, when I was a teenager, I was always the person that people came to for problem solving, and I didn't realize that that was a gift that I had personally, and that it was working for other people, and they found the need to ask me questions about how they should go about resolving a potentially challenging situation. And it wasn't advice like do this, do that. It was more about like having a conversation. You know what? It was a Socratic conversation I used to have with people. But but
Mm,
when you're 15 and you've got no idea what the hell a Socratic conversation is, you you find yourself in weird places of not being understood, and people kind of wondering who is this weirdo, why is he among us. And I felt like always out of I felt like I was always the the odd one out in groups of people anywhere. And it wasn't about the fact that I got along with everybody because I was quite bubbly and all that kind of stuff, and I could park my Socratic states often enough so that I could just get along with people. But it always bugged me as to why I was having conversation with people, and then they would sometimes gloss over and just kind of fade away and stop the conversation because I was taking it somewhere where they weren't, and I didn't realize. So I went to counseling when I was
interesting.
25, and at 25, I haven't stopped, and it's actually is literally now that we've kind of had this conversation together. It is to test my thinking and my ideas and the way I go about my life so that I'm not the only one thinking these things and think I'm right all the time or wrong all the time. And I just love it. It's a
Well,
completely different version of
it's
counseling for me.
interesting. Counselling is something that I would never consider
Mm,
because I think I have a way of, I say, I do internalize it, but it's almost like I'm solving those problems. You know, this is bad,
mm,
this is good, this is bad, this is good. I can do that. That's fine. That's fine. I don't think about it. You know, all the, you know,
mm,
don't think about much of the time. I'm pretty shallow,
mm,
but I've always because my brain is occupied by something, whether it's building drones or writing
mm,
software or
mhm,
whatever it is. I have something positive. It's something. I guess it's something that I latch onto
uh-huh.
that I do, and that's I. You was talking about when you're 14 or 15. I didn't, like most people at age, you hang around with a load of people. There was nobody that I was really friends with. And they're
Mm.
people I've never kept in contact, but I would just bumble along and not think about things too much, which is sort of quite a shallow way of thinking, but it's actually quite a good way of
Dealing.
moving on. You're not concerning yourself with too much sort of crap that's around you, thinking, I can actually go and paint that tank on my motorbike when I get home. It's something positive, whether
It's
things with
local
school.
thinking. It's a good, I think an analogy is like it's local thinking instead of global thinking, right? And most people are dealing with now being inundated with information from all around the planet on a mobile phone. And instead of understanding the issues that are happening in your town, in your suburb, in your city, you're dealing with and distracted by issues that are happening far, 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 far away that you have no positive influence over. And that is kind of what you're describing. You're describing locally addressing and assessing the things that you need to get through your day in a in a very calm, collected way, solving problems, helping out where you need to help out, fixing the things that need to be fixed, and then moving on to the next part of your day. And that's kind of me. My method of doing that is, your method is being occupied with a task. My method of doing that is communicating it, is talking it out. And tasks, I can't, when I'm having a bad emotional or psychological response to something, I cannot do a task if my life depended on it. It doesn't matter what the task is. I just can't switch that part off to do something to take me out of that space where I have to cognitively um, uh, uh, overcome the situation, whatever it is. Once I cognitively overcome it, no matter how dramatic it is, and the world could be falling down around me, I'm fine. I can get on with life because I've grappled with it cognitively.
So I think I'm sort of a little bit opposite to you
Mm-hmm.
because I can't remember who somebody once said about the amount of news that's coming in. Somebody once said something like, "You can't know everything,"
Mm-hmm.
and I think you've got to be aware of what's going on in the world around you. But I sort of think, if I am feeling bad or trying to work out something, what I like to have to do is something that I'm doing that I'm thinking about. When you're sort of lying in bed at night, drifting off to sleep,
Mm-hmm.
you might be interested in fixing up motorbikes, fixing cars, or even planning on what you're going to do in the garden or something boring like that. But you're dreaming, you're thinking something through, you're solving a problem.
Mm-hmm.
You're being a maker, which is, maker is a big word these days.
Mm-hmm.
People think of it as physically making things, but writing software is being a maker, doing the gardens being a maker. And it's about sort of having some, you set yourself a goal, like a project
Mm-hmm.
that you're doing, and that's thinking, well, how can I get that bit done? Now, I know I tend to like fall into that, and I know that Barbara will. When I'm really thinking about stuff and I'm in that zone thinking about things, I do get scathing comments about you're like a zombie again. And it's because, and that sort of that used to be a problem years ago, but
Yeah, yeah.
we
The
know each other a lot
appearance,
better now.
the outwardly appearance doesn't look like somebody who is perhaps concerned or solving or whatever. You express things physically differently than, quote unquote, other people who look concerned about something they're trying to overcome or
Well,
solve.
sometimes I am like, as I can go onto autopilot and
Yeah,
respond to somebody talking to me,
yeah,
but my brain is whizzing away thinking about some other thing, which I think is more important
yeah,
because I haven't worked out how to solve this particular problem.
yeah,
But um, I, counselling is something I don't think necessarily I would benefit from.
yeah.
Um,
You
Occasionally, I've
know,
spoken to people about.
yeah, a lot of people say that, and I get it too, right? Because sometimes there's some sessions was like, what the hell was I doing here that session? So if I set the parameters very differently. When I went to counseling, I didn't go there with a diagnosis, and I didn't go there to receive a diagnosis or to get a diagnosis or to be told you're experiencing this, you have that. I went there as a learning experience. You're a counselor, you're older and wiser than me, A. So I was 25. My counselor was probably in her late 50s when I met her. And I'm going to come here and I'm going to tell you my dumb shit, and you're going to tell me whether I'm right or wrong. And I'm going to learn from you. I'm going to ask you questions like, why do people, because I used to have this thing, people would come up to me and just start like, handling me, like touching me. And I used to have people who I labeled like touchy feely. They're very touchy feely. And I don't know why I'm attracting them, but they'll come up to me. I've never met them before. And they'll start touching me and
Ooh.
hugging me and doing shit. And I'm like, why is this happening to me? And I would go and ask questions, not about me specifically at that moment, but I would ask questions about why would somebody have the ability, the confidence to come and do that to me when they don't know me, etc. And I would perhaps get a hypothesis on the thinking of that person. And then I might go to my counselor and ask questions like, why does my particular family member behave like that? And then she might give me a hypothesis on that. And that might be, well, that they were born before you. They were a single child. They had this, and they would she would explain just some things that wouldn't justify their behavior, but might give it a little bit of background, so that my response then was, instead of a reaction, it was a response from knowledge rather than a reaction from my head going, this guy's a complete idiot, I've got to punch him in the head. And then
Yeah.
it enabled me to deal with people differently and give them grace for who they were rather than get offended for how they behaved.
Yeah, um,
And
I
that's,
tend to I tend to quite quickly distance myself from when I was younger, I
yeah,
couldn't I wasn't mature enough to even verbalize it. But
yeah,
if my stomach told me
yeah,
that there's something not quite right about this person,
yeah,
I just keep away.
yeah,
And I don't that's the way, and then forget about it. You
yeah.
know, it's
And move
just
on.
I'll go off and do something else.
Yeah,
Because
I
and when you
love it.
get a bit older, you're able to, especially when you're in business and you're working with people, because
Yeah,
sometimes to be professional,
yep,
you can work with somebody. I have this thing that you can work with people that you like and
yeah,
are really good. You can work with people that you don't like and are really good, and
yeah,
you can work with people you don't like and are terrible,
yeah.
whether they work for you or whether you work for them. And you have to develop a strategy on how you deal with that, because sometimes you can't just run away.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just leave,
Correct.
for whatever reason, because they might be paying you lots of money or something. So, and when you're younger, you don't have the sort of like, you don't have the hours of knowing
Correct.
how to deal with that.
Yeah,
And then you make lots of mistakes along the way.
yeah.
But my default action is no, there's something, doesn't it's not particularly male or female, it's sort of
No,
like thinking, I don't,
it's
there's
patterns.
something about this, there's something about this aura here, or something, whatever it is, that I, I don't quite like. I won't explore it. I won't try and solve it unless I have to. I'm going to walk away.
I'm out of here. Yeah, yeah. That's more me now. At the beginning, it was my personal life was influencing and bothering my work life because I was
Okay.
seeing those behaviors in work colleagues and becoming overly confrontational. And I don't mind a confrontation. And that doesn't always go down well. And it's like trying to occupy both worlds without being a little kid who's 14 when I'm meant to be an adult who's 25. Like, was trying to grow up in that space. So I had the parameters on counseling were set so that I could walk away a more intelligent person and have more ways to solve the same problems that you solve in the way that you solve them.
And I guess when you come across those situations again, you've got a better understanding of why
That's it.
that is. See, I don't really want to know why. I
Yeah,
think
you don't mind.
it's interesting, this conversation. The thing I find I do a lot, which I don't know whether is clever or just completely childish, in a situation where you can't just run away,
Yeah.
I spend a lot of my time working out how I can irritate this person without them realizing that I'm doing it deliberately. And when you hit on it, you're thinking, yeah, that's good. I just tiny things sometimes, but
I love it.
and then it's sort of I think it's almost like a schoolboy behavior. I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
but you have to have mechanisms to deal with just idiots,
Yeah.
because
I
they
hear
can make
you.
your life. It doesn't matter. I say it doesn't matter whether you work for them or whether they work for you. You
Yeah.
can be in a professional situation. But yeah, I think that's I think possibly my character, which has
Mm.
given me the ammunition to deal with a situation I wasn't expecting. So
Yeah.
it's not something, I say this is the first time I've really talked about it with somebody in any sort of depth, other than the silly things that happened whilst I was in hospital when I was walking and planning how I was going to sort of wind people up when they come to the door or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it's
Relationships get tested during stroke, all kinds of relationships, personal, work ones, etc. And there's a lot of stroke survivors who will go, I'm not putting up with this shit anymore. I've got too many other things to be dealing with and overcome. And they just pause relationships. They cut relationships off that weren't working, that they were just being pleasant about or nice about, and they just move on.
I think when you have touched or been in close to touching your own mortality,
Mm,
you think about things slightly differently. I try not to because I still think I'm going to live forever, but I know I'm
mm,
not.
mm,
I'm thinking, how many more years could I be writing software and developing apps and flying drones? And I'm thinking, oh, maybe 10 or 15 years. Well, who, you know, will I be writing software when I'm 80? I'm thinking, now that's a challenge. You know,
yeah.
you,
Why
you know,
not?
but yeah, well, that's it's a goal, but I think it's not something I'm going to stick to.
Mm,
But I think it's something where you sort of I'm not one for making lists of these are the things I'm going to be doing,
mm,
because the way that I think I deal with life is somebody once explained it to me about how why I was sort of like got interested in different things. He said, Dave, you're a bit like a bloke that's sort of like bumbling around in a dark room and you can't see anything, and you sort of go, oh, what's this over here? This feels quite nice. Oh, what's this over here? Oh, that feels quite nice. And it's sort of way of just sort of thinking, just moving between things that you find interesting for some reason,
mm,
you know,
mm.
and you can never quantify what that reason is, whether it's work, whether it's, like I say, I, I like to describe my work as a paid hobby. And I was
Why
talking
not?
to somebody years ago at a wedding, and I was just sort of I can't remember. I was talking to somebody that I knew, and there's a woman over the other side of the table. She says, "Oh, sorry, I couldn't help but overhearing." She said, "I think that's a really good way of dealing with why do you stick with a job that you hate and people that you don't like? There's no reason why you have to stay there. If you have the confidence that you can do something, whatever that is, or learn how to do something, go off and do it. You might be well paid, but sometimes, they're just golden handcuffs. You have to find a way to earn enough money to live. I mean, I'm fortunate I don't have a mortgage or anything like
Yeah.
that, so but I can still, you can all, we can all do with more money.
Mm,
But I think, you have to do the things that satisfy you for some reason.
yeah.
Particularly people having worked at organisations like the BBC where they have final salary pensions, and it's all like this dick waving contest about how many years service they've got. So, how much they will get when they retire. And I'm thinking they'll probably drop dead within a year.
Mm.
You know,
Before they
what
retire.
what's the point? Just go and do the things that you enjoy.
Yeah. I
But
believe I believe in that too. I love that. As we wrap up, because I'm really enjoying
yeah,
our
sorry.
chat, but that's
All
all right.
right.
We'll need to wrap it up at some stage. But as we do
Sure.
wrap up, let's talk about the last three questions that I ask everybody, which is, what's the hardest thing about stroke for you?
Um, Probably dealing with how my family are impacted by it.
Mm,
Children, you don't want to worry about. Same thing, with my wife, Barbara. Um, but because I always felt whatever the situation was, I'll be able to find a solution to be able to do something. But it's how it freaks the people that are close to me. I don't have a big circle of friends. I'm sort of a bit of a lone wolf in a way. But I think it's close family that is they're the ones that are impacted by, I think, more than I was. You know, I'm going
def-
through the
The
You
fear
know,
of maybe losing you.
exactly. Yeah. It's not about, it's because, we're a reasonably close family. Well, very close family. Reasonably is the wrong word. But it's and we're all fairly sort of easygoing. So when something like this happens, it's especially I was thinking for the kids. I remember the daughter rang me up. She said, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say." I said, "Well, I'll be all right. Be fine. In some shape or form, I'll be all right. You know, I won't be if I've been squished against under a articulated truck or something. But with this is fine. There'll be some way through it." So that
Mm.
was difficult to deal with. I was worried more about that than anything else, if I'm honest.
Mm. What has stroke taught you?
An interesting one. Um, I'd slightly switch it round to something I touched on earlier, which is very occasionally I thought about how would I react if I had some serious illness, and I reacted in the way that I was happy with. So what I have learned is that what I had sort of not planned, but vaguely thought about in the past
Mm.
was the way I behaved, you know, in a positive way, and
Mm.
not let it impact me. So I don't think my character has changed particularly. Um, I think I one thing I have learned is that I don't want to live too far from a hospital.
Yeah, fair enough.
I used to my both of my brothers live in the middle of nowhere, and I always thought I want to live in the middle of nowhere. Barbara, no. But now when we've thought maybe about moving or something like that, I want to be somewhere close to a hospital, preferably a university hospital that's, not more than half an hour away. Because, yeah, and I would imagine that's, it's going to be difficult in Australia,
Oh
because
no.
it's a much bigger country.
Well, it is if you're in the middle of, yeah, the country, if you're living in like the
Yeah,
outback. Oh my gosh.
yeah.
Actually, I was at a stroke conference last weekend, and they're talking about 5 hours to hospital for somebody who has a stroke in the middle of the Northern Territory. It's terrible.
If that's a big proper bleed,
Yeah,
you know, that's you're not going to survive that.
that's terrible. Yeah, and that they're one of the things that they're challenged about is the people who live there typically are annoyed with the fact that it takes 5 hours to get to a hospital, right? And that's fair enough. And then the government, from a government's perspective, the government would say, well, there's only 100,000 people living in there. We can't have a hospital the size of the one in Melbourne that services 5 million people. And it can't have all the machines and all the buttons that go ping. Like they just can't do that. And
Yeah, yeah.
that's the challenge that people face. But I agree with you. I am very happy that I was able to drive to at least in my like where I live, there's a hospital 5 minutes away. And then the central business district where I was working when the third bleed happened, I was probably a kilometer from the hospital. So I reckon that's a very good thing to aim for, to be close to a hospital.
Yeah, and I think that's something you own that only really crosses your mind
Mm,
when like say, you've touched your mortality.
yeah.
I think it's just being practical,
Practical. Yeah. I like it. I like
which
it.
is boring, but it could save your life.
It's a very good outcome. Um, and then I would like to know, there's other people listening, they're going through our journey. They might be at a different stage of it, something more dramatic, less dramatic, whatever. They're stroke survivors. Um, what what would you like to say to them?
Um, Sort of all the things that I've said previously, which are easy to say and I found I could deal with them that way, but I can well imagine for other people it's difficult. The sense of humor thing is a good thing. Being positive and just dealing with everything. Just shelve the stuff. You can't solve everything all in one go. But what you can do is sort of like, as you said, you deal with the serious stuff. Will I be able to do that? Will I be able to do that? And sort of like not forgetting about it. You can't just bury it. But I think, just deal with it as positively as you can. Um, and I think, having the family around is a big thing.
Mm.
I really feel for people that have had strokes and they're maybe in off the street or, something like that, which is um, or for whatever reason they don't have close family.
You need to build a community for sure. You need to have friends or family, someone that you can call on, receive a plate of food from, or lend an ear. Have somebody lend an ear to you. Like, you need to create a supportive community around you. If you haven't got one, that's probably a priority.
Like I say, I've never really talked about this with my wife
Yeah.
or anybody because it's not. I didn't. It's not a. Not. I didn't see the point, but it didn't sort of. We've touched on sorts
Yeah,
of
of
things,
course. Yeah.
but I think it's that's my nature.
Yeah.
But I think for other people, who like to talk about things, if that's the thing that solves it or helps them deal with those problems, that type of problem, then that's good. You've got to go with what works for you
Yeah.
fundamentally.
Yeah. Dave Brooks, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
It's been, like I say, it's been very cathartic because it's not something I particularly thought about. So it's actually been, I think, a really good session. It's fantastic to meet you and see that you're doing so well, and the podcast is doing very well as well. And it's, I'd imagine in, Australia where you're doing sort of the sort of live events and those sorts of things. That would imagine is also, you know, like counselling for you, because you're speaking to so
Indeed.
many people.
Indeed. I'm I'm a counseling aficionado. What can I say? Uh, I just go and get it anywhere I can, wherever I can. But thank you, mate. I really appreciate it.
It's been fantastic, and yeah, great to meet you.
Well, that brings us to the end of another episode. Dave's journey is a testament to the power of humor and resilience and the importance of taking things one step at a time. His ability to stay grounded and focused on what he can do rather than what he can't is truly inspiring. If this episode has helped you in any way, or if the podcast has been a source of support for your recovery journey, please consider supporting us at Patreon by going to patreon.com/recovery after stroke. Your support allows us to keep sharing stories like Dave's with stroke survivors and caregivers worldwide, making a real difference. Thank you to everyone who has left a review on iTunes or Spotify. Your feedback helps others find the show and builds a community of encouragement and strength. If you haven't yet, please consider leaving a 5-star review or sharing your thoughts in the comments on the YouTube channel. It truly means a lot. Thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.